How do you see the Fed moving right now? Because they were on course keeping inflation as their central target. I'm not saying they have abandoned it, but given the noise in the banking space, has their job become much more complicated in a sense? Could they now begin to think that their primary problem or the primary issue is to resolve the banking system and to get trust back into that system rather than fight the fire of inflation?
It really has made their job much more complicated because in the near term, you got to stop the banking crisis. Because if there is a banking crisis, victories against inflation are going to be hollow because what are you fighting for? The entire economy is being taken down by banks in trouble. So I think for the near term, I'm sure there's as much focus on the banking crisis as there is on inflation. But the Fed can't let inflation kind of not be taken care of because if inflation keeps climbing, part of the reason banks are in trouble is because of inflation. I know people have said, well, banks are in trouble because the Fed has raised interest rates. The Fed did not raise interest rates. Inflation raised interest rates. The Fed chased interest rates up in the market. Inflation is at the source of the banking crisis. So these are not two separate problems. Inflation gave rise to the banking problem. And I think the Fed knows that. It knows that it needs to fix the banking problem, but it knows it has a bigger source problem, which is inflation, and they need to take care of that as well.
Now, is this an American problem, Ashwath, primarily? Because, over the last few days, there have been lots of ripples and tremors across Europe as well. In India, most of the regulators have said so far that our system is different, our safeguards are different, and India is not in the same boat. Do you therefore see it as in a sense, a localized American problem, or does it have global ramifications?
It's less to do with geography than with parts of the world where interest rates have risen a lot. That's true in Europe and in the US. If you look at interest rates, the T-bond rate at the start of 2022 is 1.5%. At the end of 2022, it was 4%. In Europe, at the start of 2022, the Euro 10-year bond rate was close to 0%. By the end of 2022, it was at 2.5%. Any market where rates have gone up significantly is a market with a banking problem. And it's not just a banking problem. It's a problem with a lot of companies that have essentially mismatched durations, which companies do all the time. But these are the times when that mismatching comes back to haunt you. What saved Asia is not because the regulators are somehow more forward-looking and banks are more secure. It's because rates in India have not risen the way they have in the rest of the world. And that's true for a lot of Asia. So I think what separates the parts of the world that are not seeing a banking problem from the parts of the world that are seeing a banking problem is looking at what rates in that part of the world have done. And that's going to give you the answer.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.